My goal with this was really, first let me do introduction. So my name is John Christopher. I do not currently work with Elixir in my day-to-day. I spent the last 13 years as building out a startup in Kansas City called C2FO, developed and then grew into the CTO. So my day-to-day job as a developer kind of ended probably 5 years ago. And then I left C2FO in October and then moved into a director role at a smaller startup again. So I'm back into coding. So I'm doing a lot of TypeScript right now, but I really love Elixir and especially Phoenix and LiveView. And some of the reasons why I really like them are, one, I like the fact that LiveView is still a very real-time, can provide a real-time, rich user experience, very similar to single-page applications that you can create with React, et cetera, nowadays. But I do like the fact that you can also stay in Elixir to do that and not have to write JavaScript and jump back into back and forth between your contexts. When we started C2FO or rebranded as C2FO, we moved to Node.js. I mean, when Node.js first came out, and the whole reason why we did that, we were doing Ruby at the time. We moved to Node.js because at the time we were writing a really thick JavaScript front end app. I wanted to keep the team within the same context. So this is something that I'm passionate about, is being able to do something within a single language and keep that context when you're building it out. The other thing that I think is really interesting about LiveView is that there's a lot of these new architectures out there. We've heard about island architecture or et cetera, where essentially there's this push to go back to server rendered applications, which makes total sense if you know how the web works. And then small parts of your application are then enriched and you have some kind of interactivity. LiveView does this really well, and it does it really efficiently. The data going across the network is not JSON. It's almost like their own binary language, and it just makes things super easy. And with LiveView, you're going to get that first server-side render out, and then you can choose which components or the whole page to become a real-time, live application. So what I wanted to do was take an application and build out. We're going to build out a retrospective board. I have my slides set up to where you could follow along. But if you don't want to do that, that's fine. I'm going to build it out as we stand here. We'll see how that goes. It didn't go super well earlier, but that's always fun. So I did want to start at the very beginning, because one of the things I've always hated is if I go to a talk, somebody assumes that I know a bunch of things, and I immediately have a bunch of questions. The way I install Elixir and its dependencies, which obviously is a language based on Erlang, I use ASDF to manage the different versions I use. ASDF has a really good site on how to install that. And then, but once you get it installed, you can ASDF plugin add Erlang and Elixir, and then you will use that to build out the different versions. The current latest version of Erlang is 25.2. And I'll share these slides so that way after the talk, people can go through and kind of follow along. And then install the latest version of Elixir, which is 1.14.2. And and then ASDF, with ASDF, you can set a local version or a global version. I just go ahead and set the global version to these latest versions, and that allows us to move on. The easiest way to check that is to run IEX. Once it's done, you should see a terminal that looks like this that gives you a session where you can start interacting with Elixir. The next thing we need to do is we need to install Phoenix. So in most cases, if you just installed Elixir, you're going to need to install Hex to be able to install the Phoenix Hex package. You can do that by running mix local.hex. You'll get an interactivity asking you if you want to install it. You say yes, and then you'll run this command here. So I am using the latest version of Phoenix. It's in RC.1. Here's another thing about LiveView that's been pretty hard to kind of learn it over the last, I would say, year and a half, is that it has changed drastically from when it first came out. And every major release seems to change the paradigm a little bit. I think that's slowing down significantly. They're getting to a point where things are going to be pretty stable. They'll probably coming up on a 1.0 of it, and it'll be easier to learn, because quite frankly, right now you could go and the Pragmatic Studio videos has a great video session about LiveView. It's totally out of date. It wouldn't even match what you're doing, so that would be kind of hard. There's a LiveView book from Pragmatic Programmers that's coming out. The beta's available, but again, it's kind of out of date. You would see a lot of different things. This Phoenix 1.7 release and the latest LiveView releases are going to really solidify kind of the paradigm that shouldn't shift and change as much as it has. The one thing I have on here is once you do this, you can run mix.local. That's going to give you a list of all the hex packages, at least the ones that can generate things there. And that's an easy way to see which versions you have installed. So from there, we're going to generate a new Phoenix project. So I'm going to jump back and forth. So I hope that's not too challenging, but so in this case, I'm just going to run mix Phoenix new retro board. Yep, I should be able to. Is that better? Yeah. A little bit better. All right. So this just ran through and it generated the project structure, and it's asking me if I want to install dependencies. Yes, I do. So I'll go ahead and say yes. Too bad I can't make time go faster on this. It'll run through the through that and pull down some of the dependencies and then build out the dependencies. I'll switch back to this while that's doing that. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to CD into that directory that was just generated by this project. I'm going to do a git init, mostly because I want my editor to ignore a bunch of files for me that it will automatically be in the git ignore there. And then I'm going to set up a database, and I'm going to run setup on that, and we should have everything we need to run essentially a Phoenix app at that point. Still going. Should have done this before. Yeah. If you go back over and yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one might take a little bit of time for you as well, because if you don't have a, I already have the Docker image down, so. Yeah. All right, so we're done there. So I can CD into the retro board. And it gives you kind of an idea of what you want to do. Again, I'm going to do a couple of other things before I do those things. I'm going to go ahead and run a git init. I'm going to do this docker.run. So I like to, by default, it wants to use a Postgres database. It'll work with MySQL, to work with SQLite, etc. But I'm going to stick with Postgres. I'm going to run this. This is going to give me a Docker image, which is now up and running. Where did it go? And then I'm going to run mix setup. And what mix setup is going to do is it's going to compile, and it's going to run migrations. It will call our seed file, which there's nothing in it currently, and do a few different things. Right now it's downloading Tailwind. So Phoenix 1.7 moves. Before Phoenix used some nondescript CSS library, I forget the name of it, but 1.7 they moved the default generators to use Tailwind CSS, which I'm super thrilled about. There's probably 50% of the people out there that are super not happy about that, but they have a very good reason for it, from my opinion. But and then what I can do here is I can run ix-s. So I'm going to run the Phoenix server. Really, I could just run mix Phoenix server, I'm putting the IEX dash uppercase S in front of that, so that way I'll have an interactive prompt to mess around with the application. If you've done any Ruby or Ruby on Rails, a lot of this stuff's going to be very similar. The guy who created Elixir came from the Ruby and Ruby on Rails community. So then our application is up, should be. And then I should be able to bring up localhost 4000, and we have the default Phoenix application running. So that was a success. Okay. Pulled up that, saw that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start with some generated code. I'm going to get it there. It's going to, what this generated code is going to do is it is literally going to build out a CRUD application for me. It's going to generate the models that we need, all the migration files we need, etc. I'm going to run this mix phoenixgen.live. That means I want it to generate a LiveView version of this. You could also run phoenixgen.html and it would do the normal controller view version of it. The second argument to it is boards. That is the context that I want it to generate. I want, in this case, we want a context that's going to manage our boards. You can think of it as like a domain boundary. I want it to generate a board model. That model will look at lowercase boards table in Postgres. And then this board is going to have one field on it. It's literally going to be a title field, and the type of it's going to be strings. So when we run this command, it's going to generate all of that. So now I'm going to generate this code. I'm going to make use of the context and the models that it uses. I'm going to end up renaming the generated LiveView. And really, you can use that to go, when you're going through an application, just go look at how the Phoenix contributors and maintainers actually would build a LiveView app. It's a good way to have an example of code there for you. The one thing I've found about it is that because they're obviously very familiar with the paradigm of how you do things, there's a lot of abstractions in there that may not make any sense to you at the time. But then as you get used to it, you're like, oh, okay, I see why you did that, because now you're trying, essentially trying to keep things dry or whatever. All right, so let me run this command. So it generated quite a few files for us, and it gives me some instructions. Those instructions are that I need to add these values to our router, and then I need to migrate. So I'll bring up the editor, my editor real quick, and actually don't let me do it that way. So let me do it this way. So that the router file is under lib retroboard web router.ex. So we're going to go in there, and this router file has a few different things in it, mostly around how to configure plug, which is the framework that Phoenix sits on top of. In this case, we're just going to go find the scope that has the root scope, and I'm going to add those. Not that, I didn't copy it properly. Let me close this real quick. I did not. Oops, sorry. I copied them properly, but I didn't. Copy those. I'm going to open the file and go down here and add them to this. Save that. And then there was one other thing it wanted me to do. It wants me to run a migrate. So I'll just follow along. Migrate. So what this is doing is now taking the migration file that was generated, which I'll show you. Those are under priv repo migrations, and it's a create board. It's going to create a table called boards, add a title field to it, and add some default created and updated at timestamps. So that now, after running the migration, we now have a Postgres database with that info in it. So now what I can do is I can go and run the Phoenix server again. I can bring the application back up, make this bigger. And now I should be able to go to /boards. And now we have essentially a generated user interface for our model. And this is very much like an admin interface. It's going to list any boards we have. I can go add a new board. Add a retro board. Can't type. It added it. It allows us to edit it if we want to. And allows us to delete it if we want to. The thing to pay attention to is this is not doing page refreshes. This is very much like a single page JavaScript application. Just we didn't write any JavaScript. All right. Not that one. So we followed through all this. I showed you we went through the generated CRUD application that it had. So now what I want to do is I want to go and actually generate an app or build an application kind of from scratch. So what we're going to do is we're going to go build our first live view. It's going to be the list of boards that we have, and then add and kind of show you how different parts of the live view system work and the expectations that it has. So in this case, I'm going to go create a file called board live. And I'm going to move so I'm going to go into the live directory. I'm going to rename the generated board live folder into gen board live because I just want it out of the way. And I'm going to create a file called boardlive.ex, which will be our first live view that we're going to create. So I'm going to actually do this from within them, not really. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this. I'm going to rename this to gen. And then I'm going to generate a file called boardlive.ex. I'm going to go into that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this right here, just trying to save a little bit of time and save that. Now, you'll notice that my editor is complaining about something, but essentially creating a module, retro board web is the top level module for this application, and that contains all of the web files associated with our web views. And then board live is the name of the module that I'm generating here. Now, this case here is essentially saying I want to use the live view behavior that Phoenix provides. So in this case, when I generated this project, it created a namespace called retro board web, which I am in, and I'm saying, hey, I want to use the live view behaviors that you generated. And because I'm saying that, my editor is telling me, hey, you need to implement a method for this to be valid, right? And essentially, I need to implement the render callback. Now we can implement this, and it's going to get an assigns map, and that is where all the variables that my template may need to access are going to be stored. And right now, I'm just going to, sorry, I'm not going to do that. Right now, I'm just going to return a Heeks sigil. So in this case, the sigils are something that Elixir provides, and Phoenix also has some of its own. In this case, the H sigil is a way for us to generate Heeks templates. Heeks templates just a HTML template where you can embed Elixir variables, but it's also going to yell at you if your HTML is not properly closed. So if you have an opening div without a closing div, it'll give you a compile error, a lot of niceties. And we're going to do it right here in the Elixir code. Now, you will see this idiom used when you're building out components, but a lot of times you will see template files, which I'll show you in a minute. But for now, we're just going to say, we're just going to put this in here so that way we can run this and see what happens. If I save that, the one thing I didn't add is I don't have a router to this. I need to add this to my router to say, how do I want to serve this up? So I'll open my router again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go first, I'm just going to go ahead and comment these out because we're not going to use them. We'll start seeing some warnings in our compile time stuff, but that'll be okay. It won't matter too much. So in this case, we're going to go to slash my boards. It will route that request to the live view that we just created, and it should just say hi. So we'll see how that goes. Close that. So there's the warnings I was talking about. It's essentially telling me that there's code in our system that's trying to access a path that doesn't exist anymore because I commented out those routes. So let me bring this up. We got that errored out because that no longer exists. And if I go here, all right, so we have a page that says hi, we're on our way. Not very exciting, but you got to start somewhere. So what I want to do, the other thing that we can actually do is I want to go ahead and I want to get rid of that render method. I'm not a huge fan of that style. So that's the one we want. So I'm going to get rid of this render method. Now, to make this not complain and actually work, you can either implement the render callback, or you can provide a template file that follows the same naming structure as the live view, which in this case is board_live, and then we're going to add a HTML, excuse me, Heeks, Heex. We're going to add that file, go into it. We will add our H1, if I could type properly. Not hi, H1. Hi. Save that. I'm actually going to do this. Start the server. Everything's started. And then this is really just going to look like the same thing, right? So now we have a template serving up, or at least a template where we can manage our HTML-centric data, or what we're trying to get across. So let me go ahead and stop the server. So now we have our first, we have a live view up. It's not doing a lot of stuff. There's not a lot of things in it that are really about being live. So let's list our boards. So what we need to do is we need to add a method or a callback to our live view that initializes the data we're going to want. So we, based on the fact that we did the generated code earlier, we know that we have models and the ability to store boards. There should be a board in there already because I'm pretty sure I created one in that previous one. So in this case, I'll go to board live, and what we'll do is we're going to implement this mount method. So, or this mount callback, I should say. In this case, it takes some parameters that could be passed in from the request, a session, so that way you can get at session variables like a user, etc., and the socket. The socket is going to be the thing, is essentially our state. This is just a, if anybody's done React and Redux, and I had not done React and Redux a lot, and then when I got to this new job and I'm like, okay, I actually have to go learn this stuff now and dig into it. And I'm looking at Redux, I was like, okay, this is just Elixir. It's just, here's a state that I pass. It does some things to it, reduces on it, and then it gives me that state right back. So this is all this is doing. In this case, we're taking the socket, we're going to assign, create a boards, essentially variable, if you want to call it that, in the state, and we're going to get a list of the boards out. So this a context method here just essentially calls into the database and says, give me a list of all the boards. And then we're going to also assign a page title, in this case called our boards. And that's all we need to initialize the data that we're going to need. But now we need to have our template updated to actually go and display those boards. In this case, I can open up our template that we had, and I'm going to add that before I delete this. So in this case, I just adding some HTML. The only thing that's a little interesting, and this is this for attribute here on this LI is a new thing in Phoenix 1.7. They stole, so I say stole, I shouldn't say that. So there is a surface library that sits on top of LiveView. They have taken a lot of the things that this surface library did to help people build components, very React-oriented approach. They're now pulling that into LiveView. So there's a lot of things that if you've ever done Surface or et cetera, they're just in LiveView now, and this is one of them. Where before I would have to write some, I would essentially build out an Elixir template for loop and do a few different things. In this case, I can just say, hey, look, I want to create LI elements. I want to do it for all the boards that are in the assigns that we're in the socket that was passed, and the assigns of the socket that was that's associated with this LiveView. And then what I want to do is I want to output the board title, because this is essentially Elixir here. So I just want to output the board title. So when we save this and go and run the server, complaining about some unexpected reserve word end. Yeah, and if you know why, I fought this all day today, and I need to look at the another topic that got people arguing was Elixir now has a format. Elixir added a formatter several versions ago, and it by default it will format your code for you. And in this case, what it did was it puts the this curly bracket on the end. Like I can go and put it right there. To me, I kind of like that better. It's obvious that that's there, but when I save and it does a format, puts it on the end. So if I'm ever like, oh, I need to add this and just DD that line, well, now that's gone. So now this should work. What is this complaining about? Words. Oh, so this is okay, good. I'm going through a lot of things here that will help. It's telling me, hey, boards.listBoards is undefined. I have no clue what you're talking about. So the problem is that this code that I copy and pasted didn't have some of the context it needed, which is I need to alias my retro board dot boards context as boards, so that way it'll know what I'm talking about now. So now it'll know what it's talking about. So I could have just said retroboards.boards instead, but no, I want to be able to just say boards. So in this case, I created an alias at the top. Now we should be able to start it. So now if I take a look at this, all right, we have not a very inspiring list of our boards. And the UI will not get much better because I am not a designer and I did not want to spend a lot of time with HTML. So it'll get better, but don't expect miracles. So we now are listing our boards. It's not a very interactive page, but it's there. All right, so what's next? So now we want to be able to add more boards. So, and I know I'm sorry, there's no way you can read this. When you get the files, you'll be able to read it. So the first thing we need to do is, well, I have a list of boards that exist. I want to be able to add boards. To do that, I'm going to have to initialize some data so that form will have access to the things it needs to be able to generate a new form. In this case, it's going to be a new board, so an empty board object or struct, and a change set based off of that empty struct. Phoenix is built on Ecto, and Ecto uses, or Phoenix uses Ecto for its database layer, and it uses change sets. I really like change sets. Change sets are like data transfer objects, essentially, kind of, if you think about it that way. Here's the data I got from the web, stick it in there. Can you validate it? Can you cast to make sure it's only got the things I want in it, and et cetera. So that's one way of thinking about it. So we're gonna go update our mount, and we're gonna put it right up here and then get rid of that one. All right, so what am I doing here? Well, one, I'm missing an alias because I wanted a board. So I need to add an alias. That'll be retroboard boards.board. So So we'll go alias in that struct. And now the thing I'm doing is, so just creating an empty board. Just call the struct, empty struct. I'm generating a change set off of it. And that's something that our context is doing. It's saying, hey, I want to get a change set of this board. It's an empty change set. There's no changes on it. So it's just going to be, here's the data structure you need based on an empty change set. And then I'm adding that to our socket assigns. So put it in the socket so that way our front end or our HTML will know about it. In this case, I'm creating a board, a change set, getting a little ahead of myself here, but we're also going to create a valid flag as well. So in this case, it's going to be false. So now what I need to do is I need to go and actually we're going to do quite a bit more here, and then I'll do the thing. So we're going to go ahead and add a validate handler. So the way, so mount and render are all part of the LiveView lifecycle. So a LiveView is mounted. It's going to call mount. A LiveView could be updated. I think that's right. And then the LiveView is going to call render. These are all behaviors that you are going to implement for it. So it knows in the LiveView, I'm going to call mount, then I'm going to call this, and then I'm going to call render. You've given me implementations of this, or you've provided files that do it, and that's what we want to happen. Now, what we're about to do is we're about to add interactivity to our page. So in that case, what LiveView wants you to do, and these are all Gen server things that you can go look up that are very Elixir paradigm things, but they're like, hey, you need to handle an event. So in this case, we want, when we're putting in info into this one title field, we want to validate it on the fly. So that way they're getting feedback as they go. And then we're going to want to save it. So the first thing I'm going to put in here is this handle event. And this is what it's going to look like. So we're implementing a behavior of LiveView. It's a handle event method or callback. It works off of why am I losing my mind here? But pattern matching. So in this case, we're going to have two handle event methods. And this first one is handle event. The key string here is validate. So when that message is sent, it's going to know that this is the event handler that's going to happen. Or we're going to be passed in some board parameters. We're going to go ahead and pull those out of the map that's passed in. And then we have our socket, which again is our state that we're going to track and change and then send back to the front end. In this case, we're going to take the change set. We're going to get the board, and then we're going to call change board with the board parameters that were there. And then we're going to put in if it was valid or not. We're essentially saying telling it to do an action of validate. I'm going to get rid of this text that we don't need there. And essentially, I was doing some logging. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put stuff back into the socket. And what we're going to put back into the socket is hey, valid is now change set valid question mark, meaning is the change set valid? And here's the change set. So again, the parameters come in, the state comes in, you reduce over it, and then you essentially send it right back out with the updated parameters. Okay, so let's see. In this case, I also need to add a save method, which I have in here, because I'm going to want to save the form that we're going to have. And this one's a bit more involved, but it's not going to matter. But this should have an impl true. Just that way we can get some of the niceties of if we do something incorrectly. And again, another handle event. In this case, we're looking for save. We're going to pull the board parameters out. We're going to see if it's valid or not. Remember, we were validating the whole time. We could have tried to send an invalid change set. In this case, we're like, hey, is everything valid? If it is, great. Call our context method with the board parameters, creating a new board. That's actually going to do all the work to save the board into the database. If everything works out with that method, we're essentially going to get a tuple back that says, okay, everything was great, and here's the board that was created. That's what this is saying. In this case, I want to handle this message in this way. What I'm doing here is I'm creating a new list of boards. I'm taking the current list of boards and putting it as the head. And then as the tail, I'm adding the new board. Or sorry, I'm taking the new board we created as the head, and as the tail, the tail is the list of boards that already existed. This is not performant Elixir. You probably wouldn't do this if you were working on something that was very long, because, but that's just kind of the way we're going to do this, because the way I want the user experience to happen. And then what am I doing? Okay. So hey, I need to update the boards data in the state. That's this new list. That's this list of boards. I need to reset our form to say, hey, we are no longer valid. And then I'm using the Phoenix built-in flash to say, hey, you created a board successfully. If our context method returns an error, then we're just going to return the socket back, and we're going to put the change set back in there with errors. And if you use the built-in components that are there, which I'm not, just wanted to make it a little bit easier on me for the moment, then you could get some built-in error messaging, but the way I'm styling, it didn't work out. I was messing things up, so I just kind of gave up on that. If our state is not valid when I get this, then I just return the state. I'm like, hey, just return the state that exists. That's what that no reply socket is essentially saying. Okay, so now we're going to need to go update our template. Oh, actually, I'm going to add some helpers here. So one of the other things that's happening that makes, what I'm about to do here may not be the most idiomatic way to do this. I want to add some, essentially some functions to help with my button on the front end. If we're in a valid state, then I want the button to have certain styling. If we're in an invalid state, then I want I want it to be enabled. If we're in an invalid state, I want it to have a different styling, and I want it to be disabled. This used to go into something that was called Phoenix views. In 1.7, views are gone. They don't exist anymore. You do controllers and components, so you can have these what they call dead components, because they're not LiveView components. They're literally just like wrappers around HTML that you want to componentize. So in this case, if I put these methods into my LiveView, they're going to be available for me to call in my template. So my template's going to call this button valid, and we'll see that in just a second. So let me, so I'm going to need to open our template, and then I'm going to go grab this. I'm going to actually add the form to the bottom of it. So in this case, I'm just going to add this here. I'm going to save that, and I could actually just keep the server running. In most cases, it will automatically update. So everything compiled. So we should be able to go back. So now we're getting a list of our boards, but we have an input field here, essentially a form and a button. The button doesn't do anything; it's disabled because we're in an invalid state. The only invalid state that we can have, which is there's nothing there. There's nothing in the title. So if I start adding another board, then our button lights up, because as I'm typing, it's actually calling validate. So let me show you in the template. That might be a good thing to look at. So in this case, I'm using the built-in Phoenix form component. In this case, it wants to know what is this form for? Like, what's the data set that we're trying to build this form on top of? In this case, it's the change set that we were building on. There's this Phoenix dash bindings. In this case, Phoenix dash change. What do you want me to do when things change in this form? And in this case, when I'm typing the title, I want you to call validate. So it actually is sending messages to that validate through the server to say, hey, typed an S, hey, typed an A. probably there's better ways of doing this, but this is just the way we're going to do it. And then I have a save binding. So that way, whenever the form, somebody, in HTML, if you have a button in a form and the action is just submit, then it's going to submit that form. In this case, that's what it's saying is, hey, when they click the button, what do you want to do? Well, I want you to call the save handle event, which is what we just did. And then the input, I could have used a Phoenix component here, I didn't. But in this case, I just created an input. The name is going to be against board. In this case, this is the title field. So it's just the title field of the board, and the way that it actually outputs that is this board bracket, title bracket, essentially like an array, like an object, kind of like a struct accessor. And that's really all it is. So we do have this button, and this is where the valid comes in. So in this case, I'm calling, hey, button valid. If it is, then put in the CSS that I wanted you to, the Tailwind CSS that I wanted you to put in. And then down here, disabled will be put on if at valid is or isn't true. And this is another thing that was added from Surface, which is, hey, you can have these attributes built in like this to where you otherwise I would have had to write very weird looking Elixir that just it sucked. But this was super awesome where you could just say, hey, I want you to put this disabled on there if it's not valid. So if we go back and we look at this, so if I put another board, save, all right, awesome. You put another board, it put it at the top. That's kind of what I wanted the user experience to be. I wanted the newest ones to be listed at the top. But if I refresh, it's at the bottom. Okay, so that's because when I did a refresh, it went through the whole life cycle again. It did a mount, it called the database. And when I called the database, there was no ordering on how we want that to actually be displayed. So we're going to go fix that real quick. The way we're going to fix that is we're just going to add some ordering to when we call the database, hey, just go ahead and do a descending by ID. So, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to go to the boards.list method that was in the, so if I go to here, if I go up, not that, don't do that. I go up to boards.list, I can look at where this is at. Its definition and implementation is right there in boards.exe. So if I go to that, what I'm going to do is, not that, if I don't want you to just call repo.all, what I want you to do is this, which is essentially the same thing, but hey, the board model, I want you to do a query where you order by descending ID, and then call repo.all. So now with that saved, everything should be in the order that we want. All right, now it's in the order that I want, and we have the a consistent experience. Okay, so now we have still kind of an ugly live view, but it's interactive. Like I can do stuff, things show up, and so now what we want to do is now we want to be able to like show that board. So we've created a board. We haven't even really generated a board, created a board yet, but we've created a board with a title, and let's be able to link to it, etc. So in this case, I want to have another live view to where when we go to the board, we have another live view process. So in this case, I'm going to create a board show.live. Let's see, that will be, let me close this. So I'm going to add board show live.ex. And I'm going to go ahead and create the template for it as well. So that will be board show live.html.tx. And we'll go back to here. So in this case, I'm going to just copy some of the code. It'll be very similar to what you've already seen. So in this case, we're going to have a mount. There's no data right now. We're not getting, and the mount, we're not preparing any data. There's no data we're pulling from the database here, et cetera. In this case, we do have a handle params callback. And this is where if, in this case, because we are being passed a value that we need to take and say, okay, we're getting an ID. We're going to get an ID of a board that we need to display. What do we want to do with that? So in this case, we're going to mount will be called, then handle params will be called, and this is where we're going to do the actual data initialization for this page or for this live view. I had planned on putting this quote in the slides, but because I was running behind somewhere, I found where Jose Valim essentially was like, because this is a huge, this was the question I had. I immediately went and Google it. There was a lecture forum. I'm like, why don't I do this in mount? I could do this in mount, but essentially I forget what his quote was, but I'll find it and put it in the slides before I send them out. But essentially, this is where we're doing our data initialization in the handle params. This time we're actually getting the ID out of that params struct or map that's being sent in. We're continuing to not use the session. And again, we have our state, which is the socket. And then what we are doing is we are going and we are assigning the board to the assigns, and we're just getting the board out of the database with that ID. So we are going to need to go and add our template. In this case, we're just going to show the title for now. Now we don't actually have a way to get to this live view right now because we haven't done anything to our router. So I'm going to go and update her. But first I'm going to update our board list to actually generate links. And I want you to see what happens because they just added a new sigil. So in this case, we're going to go to board live .html, and we're going to update this code here, starting with the UL. So what I'll do is I'll come there, do that. I will get rid of this, and I'm going to save this. Now, our editor's complaining. Why is our editor complaining? It says no route path for retro web board web.router matches my board's pound board ID. This is something new in Phoenix 1.7 as well. It used to be that you literally had to write code that even the maintainer of Phoenix could not get right. Or Chris McCord, if you watch his ElixirConf video, he talks about how they changed this because he couldn't get the generated code of what you'd have to put. You'd be like router dot board live. It was just like you had to, there was a pattern that was there, but you could never get it right because it was generated off of the file names that you had. And it was like, is it one word? Is it hyphenated? So what they did is they added these P sigils. And what it's telling me is like, hey, this string, which is how I would like to work with routes / my board / there's no router for that. It doesn't work. This link's just not going to go anywhere. It'll still let me compile, I think, because it's just a warning. But this is pretty awesome that it does this now, because now you can use the P sigil, which is this here, and just pass a string. This is what my route should look like. And it'll generate the proper code and tell you if it's wrong. So in this case, we're going to I got to go and get the router information that we need. So in this case, it's going to be this. Close that. Open this. And we're going to go down here to the other ones that we have and just add. So it looks exactly like how I would put in there. Hey, my board / ID is what I want to go to, and you're going to show me this live view. So now everything's compiling properly. And if I go here, these are now links installed a little bit better. So now I go there. Hey, it's another board. That was interesting that it did that. I think it must have recompiled something when I did that. But that's so we now are looking we've been able to look at our boards or move on to our boards. So now these boards should have cards as a retro board. We're going to have the end product will be, there's going to be a start column, there's going to be a stop column, and there's going to be a continue column. And all of us should be able to connect either as an authenticated user or as a guest, and we can all add cards about what we need to start, stop, and continue. They're all sprint retrospective type of board. So in this case, I'm going to go and create the model and domain of what I think our what our cards should be. So in this case, I'm going to grab this real quick. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. So in this case, we're doing a context generation. We are not generating any LiveView code. All I wanted to do, in this case, I'm saying, hey, I need you to generate a context. I want that context to be cards. So that's where all of my, get list of cards, et cetera, methods will be. I want you to generate a model, a card model. I want that model to look at the cards table in the database. And I want you to go ahead and create a migration that has this info for that table, which is a card should have a body, a card should have a type, a card should have a user who input the card. In this case, it's just going to be a username. And I want this card to belong to a board. So in this case, board ID, you should have a board ID foreign key on it, and it's going to reference my boards table. So I'm going to run this. It's going to, again, generate some code for us. It generated the model, card model. It generated the migration, et cetera. And then I'm going to just go ahead and run mixecto.migrate. So now our database is updated with our card info. So here, what I want to do is so the database knows about the relationship. Well, now I want to go and update our actual model code to know that it also belongs to that code. So, man, that is a horrible font. So in this case, I'm going to go add this this to the card that was generated. So we in this case, we generated a card.ex. Oh, okay. So it did what I asked it to do. And what it did was it said, hey, I created a field called board ID. It's an ID and it's a foreign key, but that's what I want is I want to add some of the benefits that Ecto has with associations. And I say, hey, in this case, you belong to a board, and the model that's reflecting that board is this model. Oh man, what have I been doing? Let me find my let me find my plug. USB-C. Yeah, I've got a plug right here. Yeah. M1 is supposed to go forever, right? Oh, sorry, it's not. It's USB-C on one end, and then they back to the MagSafe on the other. Okay, so in this case, we created the belongs to, and then we also need to update the change set to make sure that a board ID is actually required. Now, there's different ways of making sure that this association is created, but this is the most straightforward. And then what I need to do is I need to go and update some relationships. What this is not. Something's not plugged in or. What's that? Other end. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. So on the other end of this relationship, normally we would have a has many. And then in that case, we want to go to the board.ex. And I realize, so this one, So we're going to add a has many. We're actually going to add 3 has manys because we're going to, we want to have, give me all the cards that are associated with start, give me all the cards that are associated with stop, and give me all the cards that are associated with continue. So I'm going to copy this and add that there. Go there, that. So in this case, it is going to complain because it's like, hey, you're telling me you want to use card, but what is that? So I need to go up here and add an alias. So retroboard.cards.card. All right. So this is, if you've done Ruby on Rails or anything, this is should be pretty straight. Has many relationship. I want essentially a method or a function on the board struct whenever I get the data back called start cards. I want it to be associated with the card model, and the query that I want you to run to get this collection, I want it to be based off of the type start. That's what this is essentially doing. With nothing is preloaded or anything with Ecto. You have to essentially say, I want you to go get those. I want you to get those that collection and make that query and preload the board when you go and make that call. It's not going to automatically do that for you, just so that way you don't set up some relationships and associations, and all of a sudden your code is dog slow because you're loading every possible thing in the database because you went n+1 queries or etc. So in this case, we need to go tell the board that we want to preload that. So whenever we pull boards, we call this def getBoard.id. So I'm going to go update that to actually return this info, and that's in the boards context. So if I open boards.ex and go to get card, no board. No, what was I going to? Yeah, get board. Am I not? Get board. Oh, I'm in the wrong file. Boards.ex. There we go. Get board. This is the one that I want to change. Yeah, it is. So I'm going to change it like this, that. Go ahead and add an end, save that. And then what I'm going to do is, nope, go ahead and copy this. Okay, so I can just get rid of this. Yep. Okay. Okay, so essentially all we're doing is saying, hey, repo, get the board with the ID and preload these associations, which are the 3 associations I created. So that way, when we get the board, our lists of these cards will be preloaded. I'm going to go ahead and start clearing out some of the layout code that is automatically generated. So I'm going to go into this app dot, I believe it's app dot. Yeah, so there's a layouts folder, and there's a couple of layouts in there. I'm going to, this is not one I want. I think I actually want roots. Maybe not. I can't read the font. I can't even read the font. That's how kind of horrible it is. So I'll have to, and I'm using a tool, like a beta tool, and it doesn't let me pick, I guess it lets me pick the theme, but it like, as I add slides, it was like changing the colors based on how many slides there were. So a little weird, but it was cool. Okay, so it's app. So it is app. So I'm going to go back into app. And I'm going to just do this. Go up, add that, and then I'm going to do this. All right. Then the next thing I need to do is fix our board list. So that way the template for our board, I'm going to go ahead and update that. So board show, this one here. Because before we were just showing just the title, now we want to show a lot more than just the title. Okay. It's complaining about something. It's saying, hey, button valid doesn't exist, and they're right. It does not exist in this live view. Where did I do? Okay, that's okay. We can go and we'll get the same. We're not gonna be dry. We're gonna actually use the same code. Drive. This is board live. I'm gonna. Nope, not. Why is it board live? That one. Okay. So I'm gonna copy this because it's actually still the same. Yep, that one. I'm gonna add this. I'm gonna go ahead and start up our server again. We did all our migrations, etc. Okay, take a look. Now our thing's all wacky here because we didn't update our template there, but we should be able to go to here. And so this is one thing about LiveView. Whenever something crashes, what you'll see, it's hard to see, but okay, it kind of blew up there. What I need to go and figure out is, well, I can look at here. It's saying, hey, board's not found in changed or true board. So essentially it's just saying in the signs, you're trying to loop through some boards and I can't find that. So I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, so that's interesting. And in this case, why is it, what did I do wrong? Did I put the wrong template in the wrong? I think I probably put the wrong template. Yeah, this is not the right template. This. Yep, wrong. So what I need to do is fixing what? I think that might be fixed our main layout. Okay. Sorry. I must have copied the wrong template, but you know, it's good to come prepared. So I actually have a already working repo. So we're gonna go and steal from that. So it's going to be way past where we are. Actually, I can fix that. Sorry, bear with me. Show listing boards, add board farm and board show board link, add cards. Okay. So let me get. I really jumped that far ahead. That doesn't make any sense. Okay. Maybe I did. Sorry. I think we already fixed that. So we need to now, what we need to do is we need to actually show the cards that we want for each of the columns. So in this case, we're going to create components for each column and the component is going to be called a board column component. So in this case, I'm going to take this code. See where I'm at. Let me just get back to where we were. There. All right, so everything should be working properly here. Yeah, all right. So in this case, I want to create an actual live component. So there's a couple of different things. There's live views and then there's live components. A live view is going to have the entire life cycle that you saw before. A live component is actually going to be an encapsulation of kind of just the like I was saying before, an island of here's a section of this page that I want to be interactive, and it's going to manage the interactivity of that section. Those are called live components. They do not have the exact same life cycle as a live view, and much like React or any of those, there's the way you feed it data and it interacts. There's two different paradigms. You can either it controls the data, and so in that case you're going to pass it. In that case, you'd pass it an ID. It would go get the representation of the data. And then it would give it to the template. And then if you're going to update that data, you would do the update within that life cycle of that component. Or there's a case which we're going to do, which is we're going to have the board live view actually pulls those three collections, and they're going to pass those collections already filled out to the component. And in this case, the component should not be going, hey, I'm going to add a card to that list, because it does not manage the life cycle of that list. You could end up getting the data sets out of sync. So in this case, what you would do is I don't know if anybody's ever heard this. I remember them saying it in the Ember context, which was data down, actions up. So in this case, we want the data came down. We want to send an action up to the live view that says, hey, there was a card added. So you need to take this card data that we gave you, store it in the database, and update the collection that you're currently maintaining for this component. So to help with time, I'm probably just going to switch to my already done version, and I'll walk through some of that code. So in this case, what I was talking about, what we're going to do, we're going to create this board column component. If you look at it, it looks very similar to a live view. In this case, we're making use of the live component behaviors. We are going to implement this update callback. In that case, this update callback is essentially the value that's going to or the callback that says, hey, do you need to initialize some data? In this case, we do want to initialize some data. We do want to have a new card change set in the components assigns, so that way there can be a form at the bottom of it that's kind of saying, hey, I'm going to add cards, etc. We're also going to put in some information that we don't have right now, and we're just going to kind of put some placeholders. In this case, we're going to say that all the users are anonymous. And in this case, there's a type of cards that we're looking at. Again, it's going to be start, stop, continue. Get a new change set based off of an empty card, and then very similar to what we were doing in the mount. You're going to see very similar callbacks, because again, these are built on top of gen servers, and there's going to be a handle event. We have a very similar form. In this case, we're they're going to be able to add the body of a card that they want to add. We're going to validate that. There needs to be some data, and same thing as before, we're going to save this as well. In this case, we're going to get some of the card params. We're going to create the card and then save that card. Now, what we're not doing here, originally when I walked through this, I was going to actually have this component save it to the database, do all that stuff. But like I said before, it was passed in a list of cards. It was not passed in a list of IDs. So it really needs to tell the LiveView, hey, you need to update your collections. In this case, the way it's doing that is saying, hey, the create a card form was saved. Here's the card params I have. I'm going to use the built-in pub sub that Phoenix has. There's here's the topic that I'm going to publish this message to, which is generated based off of it's going to be the board ID and a new card message, and it says, hey, here's the new card, and here's the type of that new card. That's the body of the message. And then it returns, it says, hey, I'm done. I don't, that's all I needed to do with this. The piece that is doing the work is actually the board show. I believe it's board show live. This is the piece that's actually doing the work because it's implementing a handle info method, which is saying, hey, I want to listen to a topic. In this case, I expect to get, I want to be pattern matched on a message that has new card and type. And that's essentially what we were just, the message we were sent. In this case, it's going to generate the cards based off of the, getting the cards out of the assigns. So in this case, what I'm doing is there are 3 different collections in the assigns that we have. There's a collection called start cards, a collection called stop cards, and a collection called continue cards. I need to get the version of cards that this type is associated with. I then need to take the board and I need to add this card that we just got in this message to that list of cards. So I'm essentially putting this in the collection, in that collection of cards of that board, putting it in there, and then I'm responding to the socket with the new board state. There's another handle info in here, and again, I'm going to speed up a little bit just because I know I've taken a lot of time, but let me do some real quick so I can show you a demo of the app that the finished version of the application. So I will need to do a couple of things real quick. Let me do that. Yes, Docker stop. Virtual board. Actually, no, I should be able to just do this. Let's do this. Let me stop this off. Let me get out of this. And then I need to just going to close these so I don't get confused. Okay, I'm going to go into retro board 2. I'm going to do a mix ecto.drop. I think that's what I need to do. Okay, so I dropped the database. I'm going to do a mix setup so that way everything gets spun up and seeded. So our database was created, migrated, some seed data was put in. Let me go ahead and start this. I'm going to start it up. A better way of doing this. Copy this real quick so that way you might be able to use that in a minute. And then so now if I look at the so the end application has authentication and it allows guest access. All of the authentication, I use a command called, I use the built-in generators for authentication. The 1.7 has a LiveView version of authentication. They previously didn't have that, and it kind of made it a challenge. You had to do a lot of spelunking into Google to figure out how do you get the user out of the session and all this stuff. It's just done now. Like you can, it generates the code. You can go modify the code, which I did to make guesswork. Nick heard me cursing when it wasn't working at like 4:30. I was like, what? Why is this broken? But I did a bunch of stuff you probably shouldn't do to make guesswork, but it's going to generate code. You own that code. You can go change it and do whatever you want. So in this case, this doesn't look completely right. I don't know what's going on, but in this case, I can log in because I seeded the data with an account. And I have a board. We go look at that board. Here's what the board looks like. Now, the other thing that I'm using is Phoenix Presence. Phoenix Presence is amazing. Over here, it's telling me who's online. This is what Phoenix Presence provides. It's showing, hey, I'm online. So if everybody, if you have a computer and you want to hit this, if you go to, what was the, I had the, let me see if I can, that, if you go to that, HTTP, that IP address, :4000, so it's 192.168.100.140, and then :400/myboard/1. If you go there, what should happen is this, /myboards/1. You should get redirected to a login page for a guest. You can put in any name you want, new guest. We're all adults. So, and now what we can see is let's see if I can. So now we're seeing everybody that's here. And as we say, hey, I want to do weekly sprints. You know, these are things that we can start. And it did not show up on that board. Why did it not show up on the board? Oh, it did. I just had it covered up. So anybody who hits this, you will see who's currently active on the board. You will see cards show up as they're added, you know, as etc. I see that I don't have the code to actually say who put the card in there. I thought I had that, but I don't. Now, we can all sit here and say, big freaking deal. We can all go build this in React and etc. I wrote 0 JavaScript to make this happen. It's all live. It's all reactive to what's going on the back end. And it's a very, it could be a way better user experience if somebody with user experience skills wrote it or, designed it. But what I'm saying is all of this was done in Elixir. Now, there is JavaScript involved in this, right? Obviously, Phoenix has a small amount of JavaScript that it ships to the front end to do all of the DOM changes and React-based DOM changes, etc. It also has hooks. So if you do need to do things in JavaScript, you have ways of doing it in JavaScript. There's a lot more interesting things that you can do with this, and you can do a ton of it in Elixir land, which is, I think, the thing that makes the most interesting to me. I will say again, I'm going to reiterate the changes that have come over the last, I would say, 6 months to a year in LiveView and in Phoenix have been amazing, and they're starting to really solidify on what the interfaces and the way of doing it is. So you will be able to, get tutorials or etc. that actually make sense soon because they won't be so outdated. And the other thing is they have built-in JS commands as well. And what does that mean? It means that you have a way of writing. So for instance, when we were doing the original, when I was doing the first demo on the generated code, there was a bunch of modals, right? And when it popped up a modal, and I could either type something in and hit save, or I could hit an X and close the modal. When LiveView first came out, if you hit the X, it literally was told the server said, oh, they hit the X, and then it would say, oh, well, you need to close the modal, and it would send it back. That's just dumb, right? Like, no, there's Java. Now you can literally write JS codes that are like, so JS bridge is what it is. You're not writing JavaScript, you're writing Elixir, but it's like, hey, when they click that X, don't actually make a server call. Just run these JS things, which are usually change some CSS or something. So that way, all of those client side interactions that should be client side only are only client side. So it's not doing this network traffic for nothing. The one thing I do want to highlight to kind of wrap it up, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Chris McCord and team created an application called LiveView as kind of here's the application that you should look at if you want to see what idiomatic Phoenix / LiveView looks like. They've kept it up to date. I'm pretty sure it's up to date with the 1.7 release, but I'm not 100% sure. I will bring it up real quick so we can give you an idea of what it looks like and what it is. But essentially, it's a live music player. So this is the Fly article on it. So you can try it now. All the code's on GitHub. It does want you to sign in with GitHub. If I sign in, okay, that's interesting. Maybe I didn't tell GitHub to allow it before. Anyways, if you go here and you sign in with GitHub, it will show you who else is online. You could share music. I mean, you're going to be limited in what you can do. The other thing that it does that's very interesting is there's code in there. There's binary code. There's code in there to look at the binaries of the MP3, because that's another thing that Elixir is amazing at with pattern matching. Is like, hey, I need to look at this MP3 to see if it's something I should not allow these people to upload because I don't want to have DMCA notices, etc. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in it, but it is a very good LiveView app to take a look at. So very ambitious. I didn't get it all done. I also didn't have everything ready. I had it all in the head how I was going to work, and just honestly, work got in the way a little bit. I'll blame it on that. Any questions or anything anybody have? Yes.
Well, it looks like one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all real time. I mean, one of the things that almost every book or video will do is they will open up the developer tools in the browser and essentially look at the network tab and show you kind of what's going back and forth, because the amount of data that they're sending back, it's not JSON. It's almost like a binary format, but you can understand it because it's essentially like, here's the template, and here's the little pieces in between, so that way they can just say, here's what actually changed, and they can do just that DOM node that needs to change, very much like in React style. So again, you're doing this with very limited network traffic, and you have that connectivity and that just distribution that Elixir and Erlang are so good about, across in the browser. So that's what I think is amazing about it. Again, Nick, who is super amazing at TypeScript and React, could do this in his sleep in React and TypeScript. And that's not the point of saying that you can't do it that way. It's just at the end of the day, it'd be interesting to see how much JavaScript was sent to the front end to accomplish this. You're going to get really good scores on your what is it called, Lighthouse or whatever, because it's all server rendered. You're doing all the things you want to do. The other thing that this LiveView apps does in the code, and it's in the GitHub repo is accessible, so you can just go read the code. It handles all the ARIA, so all the ARIA commands that it wants. It does all the things that you should do to set proper focus or return focus. They put in a lot of effort to show that you can do all the things that you need to do for an accessible, real-time app, and you can do it without having to send a ton of JavaScript clients to the JavaScript code to the client. And most of this can be server rendering. Yes.
I think you mentioned you're not actually doing this in your day job.
No.
What's your roadmap? Do you hope that happens?
I mean, the reality of it is yes, I'm at a smaller startup. Is it at the beginning? No, they already have a ton of code. They have a ton of people who know how to write TypeScript. I mean, the team there is very interested in this and they want to do new things, but I still have to, I have equity in the company, so I would like to make money. So, if I were starting brand new, and in most cases, I think of most cases, I would probably start with Elixir. It depends. Obviously, you use the right tool for the job, and I think in most cases, this tool, like my previous company, if I could have, it fit every tool they had. Like we were using what's the reactive Java framework that? Oh, what do you remember the name of that, Nick? Akka. So we were using Akka Scala. I have not looked at this, but I heard the story, so maybe it's not true, but I like telling it even it is because it's funny. Akka came about by a contractor going to a job. They listened to what they wanted, and he was like, "Oh, so you want to do this in Erlang?" And they're like, "No, we want to do it in Java." He's like, "No, you want to do it in Erlang?" "No, we want to do it in Java." So all right, so he wrote Akka. And that is where Akka came from, because it was based off the actor model that Erlang provides. Elixir is really just syntactic sugar. It's more than that, but it provides the syntactic sugar. As a previous Ruby developer, that's one of the things I also love, is that it makes sense to me. I still don't like Erlang syntax. I can understand it now, but I would much rather write Elixir, and you just get this VM, the virtual machine, this Erlang VM that's so amazing with a very approachable language. It's like, I hate Java, but I can't argue that the JVM is a great virtual machine. Like it's a great virtual machine, but I wouldn't want to write Java anymore. Erlang is an amazing virtual machine, and Elixir is a great language on top of it. Cool.
I was just gonna say, I mean, the thing that I keep thinking about with Phoenix and LiveView is, there are a lot of times when you're building, you're building the API between the JavaScript front end and some server backend, just to exchange data between those things.
Yeah.
A lot of times that API was built. And so you've got all this layer of an existing team negotiating the API calls just to pass data, and you're marking data, from JavaScript and plain text, and then you're going to mark up plain text JSON into whatever that backend does. And then so you have this whole layer, and to the kind of that, I don't know, just go away. And it doesn't really add value. I mean, if you were exposing it, that'd be different. To your point about, if I could pick and start from scratch, and I could eliminate a whole layer.
Yeah.
Of code.
In most cases, I can't think of a reason why I would pick this. Sorry.
Well, it sounds like you can use this in a lot of cases now when you do reaction. Are there any apps that this enables that you really couldn't do before, or you really aren't before? Does it open new doors?
I don't know that it opens new doors necessarily on the web, in the sense of you can do things that you couldn't before. I mean, the presence and the real-time nature of it is very interesting. And I mean, the WebSockets and that's what it's using under the covers, is using WebSockets and falling back onto long polling, all that stuff. That's been there forever. And I guarantee you there's still firewalls out there that cause problems, because there will always be large companies that make things hard. One area where Elixir is starting to take off is that it didn't before is big data. So they put a ton of work into working with big data and running models and doing that type of stuff. There's a thing called LiveView. So if you're familiar with I always forget the name of the Python Jupyter. Yeah, there's a thing called LiveView, and some of the things that they're building in that are pretty amazing, because it's literally just like Jupyter. It's like, oh, I can write code and it's going to spit out something, or it's going to show me a graph. People have built security training in it now. So like you can go and do your security training where you're putting code in there and ask you questions and stuff. It's amazing. Some of the things that people have built in that is pretty amazing, but that's a pretty cool thing. The other area where Elixir shines is on hardware. So like, obviously Raspberry Pis and other things, but in a lot of these IoT devices, there's a really good framework. I forget the name of it. Nerves, yes, to go do that type of work. Because again, because it's built on top of Erlang, there's just so much that it can do. The other thing that's exciting that may not be exciting for some people is they're looking at adding typing to it. And they're looking at doing it in the way that very similar to how TypeScript works. Not similar in this, I forget, what's the type of typing that TypeScript uses? Do you remember the name of it? Huh? That's not the word I'm looking for, but it's going to use, it's looking at, some people as part of their doctorate or their dissertation, we're looking at adding this type of typing, and it's kind of caught on. They're going to see if they can add it. And I would say that's one of you don't need it. Like, I don't think you have to have typing, but I will say typing certainly makes, I like writing JavaScript now because I write TypeScript, right? I don't really write JavaScript much anymore. And I do like TypeScript. I do like having the bumper there to say, oh, you're going down the right path. But you already get a lot of the good tooling out of it with some of the LSPs, language servers.
I don't necessarily put back, but maybe on the full stack Elixir approach, where you get rid of JavaScript a little bit. So I come from a pretty heavy Rails background, and now I actually really spent a lot of that in Ruby and really how the Rails call. But this is honestly, I think what I see with VMs is the same issue that I run into a lot of places with Rails. And that's your front-end developers and JavaScript people. And so a tool like Phoenix, I feel like it's good when you want monolith, full stack, like your backend, when you want your backend developers to be able to create interfaces. But if you're going to have true front-end developers, you're going to be hard pressed to find front-end developers that you can teach Ruby so that they can work with Rails templates, or you can teach them another Elixir. They would use things. They're going to be in your same repo. Once you have your beautiful backend developer, as they choose for so yeah, I think that's the check off. Is that like for an application where I'm backend developer primarily, but I want to be able to go with full stack. Yeah, Rails, Phoenix, those are the tools for that. And get into a bigger environment with these problems. Because you were mentioning Scott, like that extra layer between reading, we got that, and then there's some GraphQL, almost exclusively for the web.
Slightly bigger.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what that did by us is front-end developers.
Sure.
We're working in JavaScript and working. We can get people to do that who are front-end people and interactive UI aware more than I'm going to be.
So when I first started looking at Elixir, LiveView wasn't around. I mean, I've been playing with Elixir for a lot longer than it seems, probably like 6 or 7 years, to be quite honest. Like, I looked at it a long time ago and was playing with it. And back in the day, whenever I created an Elixir project, I would always do the no HTML. I don't want your templates. I don't want any of that. I just want I want the functional code, and I want Ecto, and etc. So you certainly can go down the path of it just being the back end, and it actually has a really good GraphQL integration called Absinthe. That's again pretty amazing. But I used to do Ruby. The previous company I was at, the first product was written in Ruby. The thing I couldn't stand about Ruby is, man, I could not get it to scale beyond, and don't get me wrong, in some cases we were using it with the wrong tool for the job, right? I'm parsing millions of invoices out of the CSV. And I need to do it in a concurrent way. Ruby's not the right language for that. So I can't be like, oh, Ruby doesn't scale. But yeah, that was one of the reasons we moved off of it. But and again, this was the only reason, one of the main reasons why Elixir reached out to me is like, that's Ruby syntax. So I like that. But I do like the VM a lot better. At least the Erlang backend a lot better. Awesome.
John, thank you very much.